What you think Keir Starmer is in China for is probably not even half the picture. So in this video, we need to be brutally honest about what's really going on. A lot of this is sort of prediction, assumption, gut feeling on my part, but my gut feelings are not often wrong. And I've got a very good idea. I've got a bit of an insight into China, and I'll tell you what I think. But first of all, we need to look at also what other deals the UK government has done in the recent months and year or so, and how they're panning out. Because what really frustrates me is almost nothing is ever what it really seems. Almost nothing is ever what they really tell you it is. So we are here on Black Belt Secrets because this is slightly a bit of drift and a bit of conversation. So do subscribe to the channel here. Still growing. Thanks to you all so much for subscribing. I really appreciate that. And we're going to look at some of these deals and what we think is really going on with these things. One thing that could be described as probably the most expensive shopping spree to return migrants, with one of the most ridiculous deals with France. And then in the second half of the video, what is really going on with China and why Keir Starmer is really in China. Now, make sure you share this video because I don't want it sort of shadow banned or anything. Like it, comment, share it, make sure you subscribe, that sort of stuff. Then more people will see it. I think people deserve to know this. And like I said, I have an insight. And I think you deserve to know what I think. Let's go first of all to this one here, this little doozy. Remember back in January last year where they announced this plan of a deal with Iraq. Now, this was a joint statement with Keir Starmer and Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani. This was announcing this cooperation between the UK and Iraq, trade, economy, investment, and so on and so forth. And they put it across to you as follows. Leaders announced a trade deal, an export package of £12.3 billion, over 10 times last year's total UK-Iraq bilateral trade, consisting of the following UK-led projects in Iraq. And they include things such as demining, which is obviously, it's a relatively good thing, I suppose. Rehabilitation, construction of an airbase, a comprehensive water project, another water project, UK-made power transmission systems, enhancing their national grid, their 5G network, a railway project, Hiller Phase 2, a UK committee appointed to deliver sewage and water processing, and the list goes on. So, and border technology and security and all that sort of stuff, obviously. And so you might think, well, this is, rebuilding a country and its infrastructure and essentially making it a much better place. And you might think, well, this, so long as it benefits the UK, you might think this is a great thing. You might think this is worth £12 billion to the UK. And in theory it is, but that's not where it ends because, as I say, it's never quite as straightforward as they try to tell you. Now, looking at the defence and security thing, it says, they've reaffirmed the strong historical UK-Iraq defence and security relationship, etc., etc. And ultimately, one of the things about all of this is that they tell you that this is all to do with security, and it's partly based on the fact that we want to return failed asylum seekers to Iraq, being one of the top 3 origins of said illegal migrants that come here, then claim asylum, they fail, and then they want to return. Now, there's another bit of a concern that I have here, because there's no, yet at least, there's no concrete hard evidence of the plan that I'm about to tell you, which is what they say is driving all of this. But even before we get there, we look at what they say about this £12 billion. And is it really £12 billion for UK businesses? Do these businesses in the UK really benefit from this £12 billion? Let me spell out very broadly how this works. You tell me what you think in the comments as to whether this is really going to work or not. Now, as I said, this agreement aims to further deter small boat arrivals. Yeah, we'll come back to that in a minute. I don't think it will, but we'll come back to that in a minute. And let's jump down to this bit here, first of all. The UK, this was August now, the UK reiterated its support for infrastructure development projects in Iraq, building on the trade package worth up to £12.3 billion for UK businesses announced following that visit in January. Let me explain very briefly how that's supposed to work. Now, this is not Well, for the avoidance of doubt, firstly, it's not the UK handing them £12 billion in cash for them to spend back in the UK. It's not that. Neither is it Iraq agreeing that, well, here's £12 million cash, please come and build our infrastructure. It's not that either. It's sort of squarely halfway between, with a huge risk of it going wrong. And guess who gets to pick up the bill if it goes wrong? Now, you may have seen in the news that the government is now looking at banning social media for under 16-year-olds, despite previously saying they wouldn't want to do that. Now, apparently, maybe another U-turn, they've softened on the idea, and they are in fact looking at banning social media for under 16s. Now, aside from what you think about under 16s using social media, I mean, many people might say that's the parent's job to sort of parent, I suppose, whether they use that and whether they are safe on there and so on. Regardless of all that, there's a couple of things at issue. Is that really viable for the government to ban it and enforce such a ban, or are we just becoming a nanny state? And what's the reason for it? Now, there is a valid reason for it, and it's the reason for this little interjection here, because one of the reasons for it is that we've been approached by a lot of parents who've now got into a position where they've got images and videos and such of their children being shared on social media that they don't want. And many of these things are on social media and they really don't want them there. Now, there's a number of things you can do about this. Alongside filing privacy complaints and such, you can use a company with whom I partner on this channel called Incogni, which is set up as an automated service for online privacy, personal safety, and they are specialized in removing your information when you've perhaps overshared or companies have collected your data on the internet or further afield. It is an automated service whereby they contact hundreds of companies and request and require under law that they remove your data from their services and thus from the internet. So essentially helping you to disappear from the internet, where you feel you or perhaps even your children have shared your addresses, your phone numbers, your email addresses that you just simply don't want out there on the internet anymore. And of course, as they're a partner to my channel here, you'll get a 60% discount off the annual plan using the code BlackBeltSecrets at the link in the description below. You'll get access to a dashboard, so you'll see just how many companies are removing your information from their systems and essentially helping you to disappear from the internet. So check out Incogni. Don't forget the code BlackBeltSecrets for 60% off. It's linked below. Do you pay UK tax? Are you a UK taxpayer? Well, if you are, you're not in luck because you're on the hook if this goes wrong. Because this deal is structured thusly. This is a UK export finance guaranteed project. And what on earth is that supposed to mean? Well, in essence, it's this. The UK says, well, we don't want to give you the money to spend on our businesses. The Iraq says, well, we don't have the money to spend on your businesses. And a bank says, whoa, that's a bit of a dodgy, risky place. Paraphrasing, obviously. We don't really want to lend you the money because Iraq this is, because we're not convinced that you'll pay it back. We need some kind of guarantee and we need some kind of premiums and we need some kind of arrangement whereby if it all goes wrong, we know we're going to get our money, because at the end of the day, banks don't do anything for nothing, and banks are all about risk. If you want to understand banks, it's risk. It's always about risk. And ultimately, even when they get that wrong, governments bail them out, as we've found out in the past. So the banks say, well, we need someone to guarantee this. Who's going to guarantee it? At least 85% or thereabouts, at least guarantee that much, because the rest is cream, right, for the banks. So the UK says, no problem, through our export finance arrangement, we will guarantee repayment of this money. So Iraq says, we need £12 billion worth of infrastructure. The bank says, well, we can lend it, but we need someone to make good the money if it all goes wrong. The UK says, well, we want to build this arrangement with Iraq and we want to help Iraq because we want them to take failed asylum seekers and so on. So we will help Iraq out by guaranteeing this repayment if it all goes wrong. So the spin to you is that this is £12 billion coming to UK businesses that Iraq is supposed to pay for. But if it all goes wrong, it is ultimately the UK taxpayer that will foot the bill, obviously through the government, through their UK export finance arrangement. Now, all of that might then sound like, well, why are we doing that in the first place? Well, because, as I said, the UK is trying to deter small boat arrivals by rebuilding Iraq and deterring the small boat arrivals by sending failed asylum seekers back to Iraq, among other things. And at the same time committing, as of August, October, whenever it was, £800,000 to law enforcement training, border security projects, and capacity building to tackle people smuggling, organised immigration crime, and drug flows. So they are sending this amount of money to Iraq to train them to protect their own borders. So literally paying them to protect their own borders, to prevent them leaving in the first place, and whatever. And this all culminates in the government's final statement here. This work is part of the government's plan for change approach to secure Britain's borders through serious international diplomacy, whilst maintaining the UK's proud tradition of providing sanctuary to those genuinely fleeing persecution through safe and legal routes. So all of this deal, on the surface, if it all works out, could be great. But at the end of the day, I have my doubts as to whether that will work properly at all. Okay, back to the deal with France, this one in, one out, and what's really happened. Before we get on to what's going on with China and what I really think is going on there and why I think Starmer is in China in the first place, and it's probably not what you think, some of it might be. But let's take a look. Do you remember the one in, one out deal where we said, well, this is a major breakthrough. We'll send one illegal migrant back to France, but in exchange, they'll send one back here, which never really made sense to me because it means that we are net zero returns because we still get one that came here illegally. So that never really made sense to me in the first place. I think it's just, if I'm being completely honest, I think it's the UK being quite weak and submissive to France. I don't like it. I don't think it's the right approach because it's going to be abused. But as it turns out, the numbers don't work anyway. Because as soon as UK said, well, one in, one out, but we'll also allow them to bring some family if needs be. Now, I'm no mathematician, but if more come than go, it's not one in, one out, is it? And it turns out I was right when I first said that, because the numbers, the provisional early numbers, are in. The UK has sent back 281 migrants, illegal migrants, under the France deal. However, that's not all. Shabana Mahmood has now confirmed that 350 have come back to the UK from France through this pilot scheme. I'm going to highlight the first S because those that will be driven mad by it will otherwise complain in the comments. Shabana Mahmood has now confirmed that 350 people have come back to the UK from France under this pilot scheme. So that's clearly not one in, one out, is it? More are coming here through this deal than would have done otherwise. So this deal clearly is not working. Not only do we have the illegal migrants arriving in the first place, which we could stop and just send back to France and let them deal with it, not only do we have them coming in the first place, but now we've got this ridiculous deal whereby we say, we'll send you one and you can send us one and tag some family along. So we don't know how many are bringing family and how many are, or whether they've just got the numbers wrong. But 350 in and 281 out is not one in, one out. That's on top of the 40-something thousand that arrived last year. So that deal with France also doesn't work. Doesn't give you much confidence now in the £12 billion package with Iraq, does it? So let's have a frank discussion about that in the comments below. Politely and respectfully, please. But let's discuss what we really think about that. But now, finally, what's really going on with China? Why is Starmer really in China? Now, you might think, it's because of digital ID, or it's because of, facial recognition or whatever. And you might be right, but that's not it. I think there is more to it than that still. But let's talk about those things first. So there is no secret that China does digital ID. Let me tell you a little bit about that, because on the one hand, yes, it works, and it works quite well. On the other hand, it can be quite difficult. Now, I don't think we as a nation are going to take well to digital ID. So the problem here is we cannot compare the two countries because we cannot say, well, it works in China, therefore it will work here. I just don't think that will be the case. But let me give you an idea about how it works. In China, now you can look at this in two lenses. I encourage you to see this through both lenses because I'm balanced like that and I like to do that. See this through the lens of what's good about it and how it can be detrimental and how you can be too reliant on it and how it can actually end up controlling your life. Now, they do it all through WeChat, which is a bit like WhatsApp, but it's much more than WhatsApp. Whereas in the UK, we would always at least used to say, give me your number, exchange numbers. In China, it's WeChat. So in China, you would exchange WeChat. In China, WeChat is used for everything. It is linked to a phone number and such, but it's used for everything. It's used to travel. It's used to buy things. Used for ID. Obviously, it's got your GPS location on there as well. So there's positives, and there's obviously you can draw negatives from it. So the positives, well, it's extremely convenient. You can be anywhere and you can buy anything anywhere. You can have something delivered to you wherever you are, and you can communicate with companies, and it's instant communication with companies. Whatever you need to do, you can do it on there. You can book tickets, you can travel, you can buy stuff, whatever. It's actually really convenient. I know how it works. I have family in China, so obviously I have seen it firsthand. I've seen how convenient it is, and the vast majority of people there find it completely convenient as to what they want to do with it. But that's not to say that they have a choice, really, because here's the downsides. If you can't use technology, if you don't know how to use it, if you don't have it, or you refuse to get it, that can mean that you're socially isolated. And it also means that there can be actions taken against you. So, for example, the travel and infrastructure in China is literally decades ahead of where we are in the UK. The UK is appalling compared to the travel and infrastructure in China. And part of the way that they've secured that is through monitoring through this digital ID. And so, if you are caught doing something wrong on the railway, your travel will be revoked. Now, there's a positive and a negative to that, and I will be balanced, and I'll tell you both. The positive is people don't have to put up with people that are, misbehaving on the railway or whatever. The negative is, obviously, if it's wrong, that's quite detrimental to you. You just can't travel anymore. Your travel privileges are revoked. But then how would people react to that in the UK? Would people tolerate that in the UK? Would that be abused in the UK? Would it just go wrong in the UK? Would we have a group of people that just don't do it and barge through the system anyway? And would the system here deal with those that don't do it? And would it just be a detriment to everyone else? And as usual, the people that break the rules get away with breaking the rules, whereas the rest of us that follow the rules are just left to a detriment because we are forced to comply with it. That's what I think would really happen in the UK. So that's the digital ID thing. Then you couple that with facial recognition technology and so on. They're talking about rolling that out across the UK, whereas I've talked about in a recent Black Belt Barrister video, a blanket rollout of that in the UK, as it is under the current law, would be unlawful because the courts have already held that would be far too much as a blanket approach. It would not be lawful. Without having a targeted approach with specific intelligence for specific places, that would be a problem. They're already talking about rolling it out across the UK. They are talking that that's what they want. That is another fairly obvious reason that Keir Starmer might be in China, because again, that's something I've seen firsthand. It's something they do very well. You just, if you go to another country, you know how it works, and you just, you're supposed to just live by their rules, live by their system, and, everything should be fine. But when I go there, I know for a fact that everywhere you go, you are on some kind of camera, whether it's an airport or a shopping mall or walking down the street. You'll be picked up by cameras within moments of arrival. These cameras are everywhere, and they will know where you are. And so if you do something wrong, coupled with your WeChat, they'll know who you are, where you are, what you've done, what you've bought, where you've traveled, and everything else. So no wonder that they implement this so very well there, because it is rolled out across the board. Now, that is another reason, an obvious reason, that Keir Starmer might be in China, asking for help as to how they roll out this facial recognition technology across the UK, because I don't think there's any doubt here that he wants to turn it into a bit of an authoritarian state like that, where he gets control of everyone in the UK through digital ID and through facial recognition. These things are not by accident. They're rolling it out with driving licenses. They're rolling it out with schools, registering births, and all sorts of other stuff. Initially, he said you won't be able to have a job without digital ID. Now they've sort of relaxed it a bit and said, well, it's not quite, we're not doing that quite so harshly anymore. What I think they've done is just softened the tone a bit because there was so much backlash. I think that's still the plan. But what is the real reason he's there? Well, let's think about governance and structure. And without going into too much detail, but what is the real reason that he's there? I personally think that there's an ulterior motive, which is not going to be made public. And I think he's there to ask about how to stay in power. Because our constitution does not allow for a parliament to bind a future parliament. Our constitution, and indeed our law, does not allow for one prime minister to just disregard it all and stay in power, save for when there is wartime, for example. So we had Churchill, delaying the elections because we were at war. So given that our constitution and our laws don't allow that to happen, why would that have anything to do with China? Well, in China, that was exactly the case as well. The China constitution did not allow any one person to stay in power, but the constitution was changed. This is historically documented, and the constitution was changed to allow one leader to remain in power. That, I think, is rather secretively one of the reasons that Keir Starmer might be in China, because he wants to know how he can twist and change our constitution to stay in power. It's a wild theory, I know, but it's not too far-fetched if you look at everything else that is going on. Everything else that they are doing, they are saying, that they're rolling out across the board. I think this is entirely plausible, that he's there for some sort of guidance as to how they can go about twisting and changing our laws and constitution so that he can remain in power. I think he's already hinted at it when he says he needs at least 10 years to fix things. But I think given the current polling, I don't think there's any chance that he would be re-elected to sit a second term. So I think there is a remit for him looking to how to stay in power. Let me know what you think in the comments about that. But that is genuinely one theory which I think holds water. Let me know what you think, and as always, thank you for watching.